What's up, family, and welcome back to the channel. So glad to have you in here with me today. Over the past few weeks, in a slew of conversations that I've been having on the channel, I've realized that my ideals about religious prohibition have been kind of seeping or seeking over seeping yeah seeping is the right word, seeping over into these conversations. So I did want to go ahead and just kind of have a conversation about some of my thoughts around the history and harms of religious prohibition. So of course, before we jump into this conversation, go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that alert notification bell, and consider joining our community either via Discord, either via Patreon, or also our YouTube membership program, which however you want to get involved, there's a way for you. And of course, check out our merch because, I've been telling y'all, it's dope. All right, so let's kind of jump into this conversation for today. Religious prohibitions have long shaped laws and societal norms, often intertwining deeply with legal frameworks to govern personal behavior. Now, while some prohibitions are intended to promote public morality or health, others have been rightfully criticized for lacking a basis in well-being and instead serve to enforce specific religious ideologies. This discussion delves into the historical roots and contemporary impacts of such prohibitions, particularly focusing on alcohol and cannabis in the United States. The goal is to uncover how religious motivations behind these bans have led to significant social and legal consequences, disproportionately impacting minority communities. So, for those of you who know, let's do a little history lesson on the alcohol prohibition. Alcohol prohibition in the United States, known as the Noble Experiment, was largely driven by a coalition of temperance movements and religious groups who believed that alcohol was the root of many societal evils. However, the reality of prohibition was rife with unintended consequences: a surge in organized crime, an increase in unsafe bootleg alcohol, and a substantial loss of government tax revenue. Yeesh. Public sentiment shifted as the negative impacts became undeniable, leading to the repeal of prohibition in 1933 with the 21st Amendment. The end of prohibition was also a response to the economic pressures of the Great Depression. Legalizing alcohol meant a resurgence in legitimate jobs related to the production and sale of alcohol, as well as an increase in tax revenue from alcohol sales. This economic incentive, coupled with the failure to enforce prohibition effectively without significant corruption and violence, prompted lawmakers and the public as a whole to push for repeal. The end of prohibition is a testament to the complex interplay between religious morality, public well being, and economic factors in shaping law and policy. Now, beyond alcohol, other substances and activities have also been prohibited or severely restricted in the United States based on religious beliefs rather than empirical evidences of harm. Now, this includes various drugs, gambling, and even some sexual behaviors where the moral argument against them are often rooted in religious doctrine rather than secular considerations of public health or welfare. Cannabis prohibition, in particular, has been heavily influenced by moralistic and racialized rhetoric rather than scientific evidence. Early opposition to cannabis was tied to its association with Mexican immigration and African American jazz musicians, with religious and racial prejudices fueling fear and subsequent legislation. This led to cannabis being labeled as a dangerous drug, despite the lack of evidence to support the claims of its alleged dangers. Now, cannabis prohibition began roughly in the 30s, spearheaded by figures like Harry Anslinger, which I think they featured him in the movie. Why is her name leaving me right now? Billie Holiday, in the Billie Holiday movie, because of his involvement with her career. And of course, he used racially charged and religiously framed narratives to demonize the substance. And I do kind of want to take a pit stop in my notes here to highlight that African Americans, one of the largest subgroup of citizens disproportionately impacted by this law, didn't get the full access to vote until the 1960s, which means that this community is being criminalized by laws that it had no representation for legislation. Now, legislation without representation is one of this country's oldest crimes when it comes to minority and marginalized groups, whether you're talking about natives or Africans or women, and that list literally goes on. Back to regularly scheduled programming. The Reefer Madness campaign, which I mentioned in a recent video, portrayed cannabis as a source of moral decay, explicitly linking its use to minority groups and suggesting it led to criminal behavior, thus justifying harsh legal penalties. The consequences of this prohibition have been disproportionately borne by minority communities. Even today, despite some states legalizing or decriminalizing cannabis, many people, predominantly Black and Hispanic communities, remain incarcerated for cannabis related offenses and are still being incarcerated for cannabis related offenses. This not only represents a grave injustice in terms of racial discrimination, but also highlights the ongoing impact of moralistic laws that disregard empirical evidence and broader societal well being. The continuation of cannabis prohibition in various parts of the United States, despite growing evidence of its relative safety compared to legal substances like alcohol and tobacco, reflects an outdated adherence to religiously motivated laws. The human rights violations inherent in this approach are stark. Individuals are deprived of their liberty, economic opportunities, and often face lifelong stigma and disenfranchisement. Recognizing these issues as human rights violations is crucial. The narrative around cannabis needs to shift from one of moral judgment to one of public health, social justice, and economic opportunity. Reform efforts must focus not only on changing laws, but also on repairing the damages inflicted by decades of unequal enforcement and providing avenues for economic inclusion and social rehabilitation for those disproportionately affected. The history of religious prohibitions, particularly regarding substances like alcohol and cannabis, reveals a pattern of enforcement that often prioritizes moralistic agendas over public well being. This approach has led to significant societal harm, particularly for minority communities. Moving forward, it is essential to reassess the foundations of such laws and work towards more equitable and evidence based policies. The shift must be from prohibition to regulation, ensuring that laws serve the public good without infringing on individual rights and freedoms. This has been something that has been on my mind ever since the early days of my deconstruction, realizing just how much of our legal system is based in religious ideology as opposed of empirical evidence. And when that happens, you don't actually create a society that's safer for everybody. You create a society that is against a few. That's what we do when we criminalize things without evidence. We turn good people into criminals. This, my friends, is a travesty, and it's a human rights violation. Cannabis prohibition doesn't just keep people, from having a healthy life. It also keeps them from finding employment. It also puts them in a place where many times they are accused of being things or seen as being things that are based on stereotypes and based on a religious narrative without having any grounding in reality. And the truth of the nature is that in cities and states where many of people who look like me participate are the places where it is still illegal. That's something we need to be doing something about. This is actually one of the first things that led to my extreme disappointment in the Black church, is realizing that the Black church has sat by silently and allowed its community to be ravaged by unjust laws. All right, that's all I have for today. I hope I said something, that maybe resonated with you a little bit, perhaps maybe even gave you something to think about. Um, like I said, this is actually something that is near and dear to my heart. For the past 10 years of my life, I've been effectively working for ways to bring people's attention to this issue, and to really begin to talk about it as an issue of human rights, because that's what it is, and it's beyond. It's the prohibition of anything without empirical evidence that is problematic, and we need to be very cautious, and we need to be watching. All right, thank you for tuning in with me today. Thank you for hanging out with me. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that alert notification bell, consider connecting with the community, and check out the merch, because as I said earlier, it's dope, and I wouldn't lie to you. All right, then, until next time, man, y'all keep rising, stay progressive, and stay absolutely beautiful, only if you can. I'll holla at you later.